11 o'clock out here in Colorado, so we are going to get started with everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. We are excited to have everyone here today. Uh, Welcome to our Bird Conservancy of the Rockies webinar, all about the great horned owl. We'll be digging in deep with them this morning. Just so you know, we will be recording this webinar, so you don't have to worry about taking notes or anything like that. And a recording of it will be up on our YouTube channel as well in a couple of days. So if you want to share it with anyone, you are welcome to do so. Okay, Zoom is our platform for these webinars. If this is your first time Zooming, welcome. It's been almost exactly a year for us here at the Bird Conservancy, um, from when we first started doing weekly webinars to now just our monthly webinars. A couple of housekeeping items. You will see down on the bottom left hand of my screen that those little icons, the microphone and the video, there should be a red line for you between or over both of them to make sure they are not on. Also, you'll see the little chat icon. Please feel free to chat. This is how we'll be interacting with everyone. Make sure it says to everyone so we all can see your questions or your comments. Um, and if you have an issue, feel free. You'll see that Tyler Cash is in there and he'll be able to hopefully help you out with that as well. So you can private message him if need be. When I'm in full screen, your screen will be as well. If you need to exit the full screen, push escape or exit full screen. And you can also click the chat button and it will dock it to the side of your window as well. All right. So we are the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. Just want to tell y'all a little bit about us in case it's your first time joining us. Our mission is to conserve birds and their habitats through an integrated approach of science, education, and stewardship. So our science team are the amazing humans out there doing the research, collecting all the data, analyzing that data, figuring out what our best practices can be to help conserve our birds. The stewardship team then takes that information and works with the landowners and the farmers and the ranchers to make sure they're doing the best practices, not only for the birds, but for themselves as well. And then finally, our education team. We are the people who get to go into schools. We get to talk to our families and our kiddos. We do a variety of programming and hopefully inspiring the next generation. And all of this, we all work together really, really well to make sure that our birds will remain in the world for generations to come. So a little bit about us, just because unfortunately you can't see us, this makes everything run a bit smoother. So my name is Stacy. I am the Camp and Family Program Coordinator. Uh, Joining me in the chat box is Tyler Cash. He is our new Camp and Community Coordinator as well. We are both based out in the Brighton, Colorado office at Bar Lake State Park. If you've never ventured out here, I highly recommend it. It is definitely a birding hotspot. Like I said, Tyler will be in the chat window. Feel free to ask any questions that may come up and he'll help answer them if I don't get to them. And today, my favorite owl is the great gray owl. That is the top picture. I have never seen one. I would love to see one. And on the bottom, which is a drastically smaller bird, is the northern pygmy owl, and that is Tyler's favorite owl at the moment. All right. So a little bit as to why I wanted to do this particular webinar. That is a photo of me a long time ago. And I'm holding a great horned owl. I was lucky and privileged enough to be a naturalist intern at an outdoor school in California where we had raptors. We had a great horned owl, a red-tailed hawk, a turkey vulture, and a golden eagle that I all got to work very closely with for a while. So you will see some pictures of that particular great horned owl as we go through our um, webinar today. So now that you know a little more about me, we want to know about you. Let us know where you are from. Where are you watching from? How many people are with you? And what is your favorite bird today? So feel free to type in that chat window um, and let us know. So look, we have Rachel from Pocatello, Idaho. Western screech owl. We have people from Aurora. Oh, watching with your two cats. Great. Oh, from Montana, Colorado. Ooh, boreal owl. From California, from Nashville, Tennessee. Awesome. I love seeing everyone's favorite birds and where everyone is coming in from. It's so great is that one of the things about Zoom is not only can we talk to people within Colorado, but around the world. Awesome. So keep them coming in. We love seeing it. Thank you so much. Okay. So you might be thinking, out of all the animals out there, why are we focused on birds? Well, a few different reasons. One, they're super inspirational. Birds have been inspiring us humans for ages, everywhere from engineering to artwork and everything in between. They're also super accessible. No matter where you live, whether you're in the middle of the city or out in the prairie, you can find birds. Now, you might not see the same birds or a wide variety, but they are still there. They provide massive ecosystem services such as pest control and seed dispersal. And finally, they're huge environmental indicators. They are one of the first groups to be affected by environmental changes. You might have seen the paper that came out last year, 3 billion birds gone since 1970. Our aviation conservation scientist, Arvind Punjabi, helped out with that research paper as well. Lots of data was analyzed and researched. It is a scary number, but we can do things to help it. It's also a great thing you can Google. There's an entire thing, 7 different ways you can help out birds in your own everyday life. So they're pretty special. Just to give you an idea of how many birds we're working with in the world, we have around 10,000 species, North America 1,000, bringing it into Colorado, which is where we're based out of, we have a little over 500 species. And where I am based at Bar Lake State Park, we have about 350 species. It's a really great spot to come out and bird if you have the chance, especially during migration. We have all the resources that they need, so it's a favorite stopping point for them. All right. So today in this webinar, we're going to learn all about the great horned owl's life history and their adaptations. GHO is just shorthand for great horned owl. We're going to learn how we can ID them in the field. We're going to talk a bit about owl prowls, or trying to find our great horned owls in the wild. And at the end, a bit about conservation. So starting off big, just so we know, are owls. They're in the order Strigiformes. They have 2 different families they can be a part of. The Strigidae, which are our true owls, and that is the family that our great horned owl falls into, and the Tyonidae, which is our barn owls. We have over 200 species in the world. You can find owls in most places. In the West, we have around 19 species out here. Most are nocturnal, but we do have owls that come out during the day, some of our diurnal friends. Type in the chat box any guesses as to what cute little owl you might see during the day. It's diurnal. Yeah. I see lots of people. We have one of our burrowing owls. That's the one that we have right out here. They're super cute. um, they are varied in their voice. So some of our owls give the classic hooting call, which we'll hear shortly from our great horned owl, but they can also include whistling, screeching, barking noises. So not necessarily your typical hoot hoot that you might hear. The main way to ID owls is by their call, unless you are lucky enough to find them flying or in a roost. Um, and we will talk about proper etiquette and how to go out on a lovely owl adventure. So, we're going to focus in on our great horned owl. This is a picture that I took. It's one of my favorite ones, just as a side note. Right after a snowstorm, I took out our great horned, uh, and he really worked it for me. So I was able to get a good shot of him. Um, but let's think about what are some of the adaptations of our great horned owl or owls in general. So you can think um, an adaptation. Anyone just want to fill us in the chat as to what an adaptation is to help us out if there are people who might not be sure? Any guesses? Yeah. Soundless flight is an example of an adaptation, the large eyes. And an adaptation is something either physical, like their large eyes, or a behavior, for instance, migration, that an animal or a plant has to help it survive. So, what are some of these things that can help our great horned owl survive? Yep, really good hearing. The disc shaped face, you can see that in this picture really well. Awesome. So feel free to keep typing those in, any adaptations you think you have. Beautiful. So here is a general list. We said that they are mainly, our great horned owls are mainly nocturnal. Sometimes they're crepuscular, which means they come out at dawn or dusk. They have that binocular vision, those large eyes. Uh, they also have some feathers on their feet. They have asymmetrical ears, the silent flight that people spoke about, that hooked beak, which is great for ripping up food, those sharp talons, and they are carnivores. So awesome job, everyone. We got pretty much all of those. So what we're going to do next is we're going to dig into some of these adaptations and exactly how they help our great horned owls survive. So our eyes, like we mentioned, they have those large eyes. They have binocular vision, which means they have really good depth perception. And this helps them that when they're flying and going down to get food, that they don't smack into the ground below them, right? That would not be very good if you're an owl. um, they have night vision. So, does anyone know what rods and cones help with our eyesight? What do they do? Because we have them in our eyes as well as our owl. What do rods and cones help with? Any guesses? Yeah, there we go. Detecting movement, color vision. Great. So our rods kind of help them see the depth and the shapes of things, and cones help them see color. So if you think our owl who comes out mainly at night, what are they going to have more? More rods or more cones? What do we think? Yeah, they're gonna have more rods. So you have more rods to help them see in the night. Um, and their eyes are immobile. So right now, make crazy eyes. Move your eyeballs all around. Unfortunately, we can't see you, but if you're sitting next to someone, give them some crazy eyes. Well, we can do this, but our owls cannot because their eyes are so big, they're immobile. They're cone shaped or conical, and they go back into the skull really far. So they take up a lot of the space. And we will get into what another cool adaptation is that an owl has to help them because, like we said, they can't move their eyes around. And that is so they can turn their head. Any guesses? How many degrees can an owl turn its head? We know a circle has 360 degrees. How many degrees do you think an owl's head? Yeah, great job. 270 degrees. So, not all the way around. Owls are not Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is dead. Our owl would also be dead if he could spin his head all the way around. And the reason why is because in their neck, they actually have 14 vertebrae. So they have double the amount of vertebrae that us humans have. So, along with that, some scientists did a study, and this is really cool, and this is where this diagram is from. A group of scientists at Johns Hopkins University and a medical illustrator, Fabian de Mercado, and a neuroradiologist, Felipe Gayud, used CT scans and other types of scans to examine the anatomy of a dozen snowy, barred, and great horned owls that have died from natural causes. And they came up with and they realized that there are four biological adaptations that prevent injury from that rapid rotational movement of the owl's head. And this study also appears in an issue of Science magazine. So, what they found out was at the base of their head, they have something called contractile reservoirs. Basically, um, a little holding place where blood pools. And they say that that's what allows owls to turn their head so radically while still having enough blood to feed the eyes and the brain. What's more, they have a complex supporting vascular network that minimizes any blood flow interruptions. So you can see in the diagram, they have lots of different arteries and vessels in there. And they noticed that between the carotid and the vertebral arteries, they have lots of small vessels connecting them. And that's what allows the blood to flow between the two vessels. So even if an owl's head is turned one way so that one route is blocked, another route can provide that uninterrupted blood flow to the brain, which is super cool. We do not have that. We could not turn our heads that fast. We would have whiplash. We would break our necks. We would be cutting off that blood flow, whereas owls have these amazing adaptations that allow them to do that. So, along with their large eyes, their many vertebrae and arteries that help them get that blood flow so that they don't cut it off. Um, they also have great hearing. So, right now, you can just kind of point on your own head. Where do you think our owls' ears are located? Our great horn owls, where do you think they are? Now, if you're pointing at our own ears, not quite. What's really cool about owls is their ears are asymmetrical. Okay, so one is up higher and one is down lower. And we'll get to why in a minute. And you can notice that with our great horned owl, which is on the bottom picture, those two tufts, those ear tufts, are not their ears. They are actually called plumicorns. It's one of my favorite words. But they're not their ears. If you look in that top picture, and that top picture is actually a picture of a northern saw-whet owl. Um, It's the only one that I could find that shows they actually just have ear holes. So it's just an opening that's underneath those feathers. So what happens is there are facial discs that are on their face that we mentioned earlier, and it essentially helps the owl to gather sound just like a big satellite dish collects signals. Each of those feathers is movable and can change position to funnel a better sound. And that sound is channeled through the feathers to their ear holes. And because of that asymmetrical ears, they actually can triangulate and find exactly where that moth or that mouse or that rabbit, where it is just by sound, even if they can't see very well. And depending on the different species of owls, the asymmetrical ears can be in different places as well. They've noticed that it kind of depends on how late the owl comes out, how much they really have to rely on their hearing. And they also have something which is really cool called the sound location memory, which means when they hear a sound, they make a map in their brain of where that sound is coming from relative to their location. And they can do this because special cells in a distinct part of their brain are sensitive to sounds in different areas. And this allows them to find that sound later. So you can think of it like this. If you've ever played Marco Polo, either on land in a pool, you'll remember that even when your eyes are closed, you usually still have a good idea of where people are around you. And that's because you can hear them and place them on your own mental map. Super cool. I love owls. So they use their eyes with their great vision, they use their amazing hearing to find their prey. And now we'll go over another adaptation that we mentioned that really can bring it home for our owls, which are their feathers. Beautiful. So you will see up on the top picture, they have, it's a zoomed in picture of the leading feather. And you'll notice that's the edge. So this is the feather that hits the air first. So the primary wing feathers are referred to as flutings. So those are called flutings or fimbriae. They're essentially a comb-like feather. And that edge, what it does is it breaks down the turbulence of when it hits the air into little groups called microturbulences. And this effectively muffles the sound of the air rushing over the wing and allows the owls to fly silently. Because that's something that y'all mentioned before is they have their silent flight. And this is the reason why they can do it. You can think of if you've ever been near a flock of geese or like ravens or crows, when they take off, you can hear them, right? You can hear that air flowing. That's because if you were to look closely, they would have a blunt edge. They do not have these flutings like our owls do. And it's all these adaptations help them get their prey. So the silent flight, the great eyesight, the amazing hearing, so that they can help survive. So let's say that our great horned owl finally he got a mouse. He brings it back up. Another cool thing about owls. If you look on the bottom picture, if you haven't seen this before, you might be like, what is that? Is that vomit? Kinda, but not really. Anyone have any guesses as to how many stomachs owls have? Yeah, two. They have two stomachs. So our owls are, once again, super cool. What they have is when they eat, and there's a nice little diagram up top. Uh, if they have a large prey, like let's say a um, rabbit, or a skunk, they obviously have to eat it in pieces. If they catch a mouse, a lot of times they will gulp down. That's my sound of swallowing in one full gulp. And when they swallow it, it goes into their first stomach called the proventriculus or the glandular stomach. And this is the stomach that holds all of the acids and chemicals to help break down that food. And they have mucus in there to help separate the digestible and indigestible parts of the prey. So it basically turns into like a soupy soup. And that's where they're able to absorb all of those nutrients. What's left over then gets pushed down into their second stomach, the ventriculus or the muscular stomach. And this is kind of like the filter. This holds the bones, the fur, anything that the owl could not digest. And it squeezes it, having like a trash compactor, into a pellet. And that's what you see on the bottom of your screen. That is called an owl pellet. So it takes an owl several hours to make the pellet. After it's compressed it actually pushes it back up into that first stomach. And it usually sits in there, they say, for about 10 hours. And during this time, an owl is not eating because it's blocked, right? There's something already in there. Then, before it's ready to eat again, it will cough up the pellet. So, if you've ever had the pleasure of seeing a cat cough up a hairball, it's kind of like that. They extend their neck, they kind of close their eyes, open their mouth, and out comes the pellet. I once asked a group of my campers to show me what an owl coughing up a pellet would look like. And you can just imagine the faces that they had. It was fantastic. Um, so they cough up the pellet and it drops to the ground. And the pellets are important because they're going to help us out in a little bit later. Um, so there's our owl pellet. Uh, so now we know we've taken a deep look into these specific adaptations of our great horned owl and kind of owls in general. So now we're going to learn more about our life history of the great horned owl. All right. So our great horned owl, its scientific name, Bubo virginianus. The order is Strigiformes and the family is Strigidae. So these owls are nocturnal. Sometimes, like I said, you can see them during crepuscular time, so that dawn or that dusk, but they're mainly nocturnal. They are a large, thick-bodied owl, and they have those two tufts at the top of their head, which we've learned plumicorns. And when they're flying, their wings are really broad and rounded, and they have a very blunt-headed silhouette. You can see in that top picture, there's no extension of the neck. They tend to eat medium-sized mammals, but they actually have a wide range. They can eat mice, skunks, rabbits, snakes, anything they can get their talons on that happen to be out when they're hunting. Uh, They vary in color with their region. Generally, they're mottled grayish brown with reddish brown face, and you can see a neat little white patch on the throat. In that bottom picture, you can kind of see it where that owl's looking at us. And like I said, their overall color tone can vary regionally from like a sooty to like a very pale color. They live pretty much everywhere. They live in forests, in fields, on forest edges. They're extremely adaptable. And in a moment, we will see their range map and see exactly how adaptable they are. They are a bit bigger than a red-tailed hawk. So if you've seen a red-tailed hawk flying before, they're a little bit bigger than them when they are full grown. And they generally weigh between 2 to a little over 5 pounds. And as with most raptors, the females are larger than the males. So the great horned owl that I worked with was about 3 pounds. He was a smaller male. And like we said, you can tell that mainly because of the size, because our great horned owls look the same whether they're male or female. Their wingspan is a little over 3 feet to a bit over 4 feet in length. And like we said, they're found all over North America. And their voice, they have a very deep, soft hoot, kind of with the stuttering rhythm. And they usually do 4 to 5 hoots. So I'm going to play their sound and hopefully y'all can hear. This is just their song. All right. So hopefully everyone was able to hear that. I played their song and then I also had played um, them duetting, which happens around this time of year when they're trying to find a mate. The male and female will kind of call back to each other. Has anyone ever heard that before? Like whether they're walking out to their car during dusk, if they're outside their house, has anyone heard that call? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, Rachel, ours talks all day. Right now, it's really cool. At Bar Lake, where we're at the Environmental Learning Center, I've been hearing a pair the last couple weeks duetting, going back and forth when I would take my dog out at nighttime. So that's great. It's really cool if you get to hear it. So, like I said, they're extremely adaptable. This is the range map of our great horned owl. The dark purple, they're found year round, and the light purple, they are found year round, but they're a little scarce. And there's not a whole lot of that. So, pretty much from what I saw, where everyone is joining us, there's a chance that you can find or hear a great horned owl. They are one of the most common owls in North America because they're so adaptable, which is really cool. So, super easy range map. There you go. They don't really migrate. So you can see they're year round. They stay in their same territory. So now we'll talk a bit about their nesting, which is what they are doing right now. It's very exciting. So, because they're found in such a wide variety of places, they have a wide variety of nesting habitats. They nest up in trees, in cavities of trees, human made platforms. Sometimes they even nest on the ground. The thing is, though, our great horned owls don't really build their own nests. They don't want to do it. What they'll do instead is use a nest of another animal. So sometimes it's a red-tailed hawk, crows, herons, squirrels. Like we said, sometimes before they'll just nest right on the ground. And they will sometimes line it with feathers or leaves or bark, or they'll take their own down out and kind of line it, but they don't generally build it from scratch. And most of the time, their nest deteriorates so much during their use that they don't return to it. Um, Unlike our bald eagles, which out here at Bar Lake State Park, we have a few different nesting. We know that they come back to their nest year after year and add to it. Great horned owls, not so much. I'm not saying never. It's very rare in science or when talking about animals that you can say, well, this will never happen. But generally speaking, they use it and then they'll find another one next year. Great horned owls are monogamous, and the pair tends to stay on their territory year round, and they stay together for at least 5 years and maybe even for life. If something does happen to one of them, generally the other one will find a new mate. And their territories range in size from just under zero point 0.1 square miles to greater than 1 square mile. And it depends on the resources nearby. Do they have enough water, food, space, shelter, as to what size that is, or if there's competition nearby. So once they have their nest, let's talk about eggs. So generally, they lay one brood per season, and when they lay depends on where they are living. So ornithologists have found, so ornithologists are people who study birds for a living, big old fancy word. They found that in lower latitude states such as Florida, incubation can begin in late November. And in the Carolinas, it can start late December to early January. But for us out here in Colorado, generally they begin nesting in February or March. And our great horned owls are usually one of the first owls to nest in the spring, which is why now's the time. They've most likely already found their mate, found the nest that they're going to be at, and some of them might even be incubating. The females, if you do ever happen to see a great horned owl sitting on the nest, the females are the ones that are usually sitting there because they have what's called a brood patch. So it's a featherless spot on her abdomen that has lots of extra blood vessels that help transfer the heat to the eggs. And the males for the great horned owls don't have this, so they wouldn't do as good a job. Um, what the males do is they get the food. So generally, the eggs they lay between 1 to 4 eggs, and they incubate and sit on the eggs between 30 to 37 days. So they don't lay their eggs all at once. They'll lay one egg, and then in the next couple days they'll lay another, and the next couple days lay another. So when they hatch, it's the same thing. They're not necessarily all hatching at once. So if you do once again see chicks in a nest, the little owlets, the bigger one is generally the one that has hatched first, and so on and so forth. So, as you can see in that bottom picture, when they are born, they're very helpless. They're full of white, fuzzy down, um, and they stay with their parents for around 42 days. We'll get more into that here. So, you can see various pictures of our little great horned owls. I think they look so cute and odd. If you ever want to smile, just go Google great horned owls. So, like we said, we're going to dig into our little owlets now. They're born with that white, fluffy down, and they're completely helpless. Their eyes are closed until about 9 to 11 days, is when they open their eyes. And they're fed by their parents until around day 20 to 27. Like we said, the male is the one that will go out and find the food and bring it back to the female, and she'll pull it apart so that the babies can actually eat it. Our, our little owls start, during this time, they're losing their down, they're growing their flight feathers, they're getting stronger, and they start to branch out usually around day 40. So, if the bottom picture you can see, sometimes you might hear people say they're branchers. They're going out, they're taking short flights, they're getting their wing strength. They've gained a lot of weight very quickly. Um, and usually they are fully feathered and ready to fly out between day 45 and 49. And once again, what's interesting to note is that those fledglings, once they've left the nest, will usually stay together for several weeks in that same territory that their parents are in. And the parents, interestingly enough, as sometimes they might try and hide from the baby owls or juveniles, um, they actually, the babies will sometimes beg. It's a call that they'll do. And sometimes their parents will bring them food to the area and just drop it off and let their fledglings rip apart the food. So even though they're out of the nest, sometimes they do still bring them food, which I'm sure if there are any parents out there that have children, um, even after they've quote unquote like fledged your nest, you might still be giving them food. All right. So we've learned a bit about our amazing great horned owls, where you can find them, um, kind of bit about their life history. And now we're going to talk about our owl prowls. Um, so we want to make sure that you have a good pair of binoculars. Um, and definitely check with your local birding groups. Talk to local park staff. There's lots of different little meetups. People call them different names, owl prowls. In college, we used to call them stupid owling adventures because on Friday nights with our professor, we would go out because you don't always see an owl, but it's more of the adventure. You can also check out eBird. If you don't know what that is, we have done an entire webinar on it as well. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel. Tyler can tell you more about it as well, but you can see where people generally find the birds. One of the biggest tips is go out during the day, scout out your location. So you're going to look for those pellets, which we spoke about earlier, right? Those big compressed pellets, because you'll find them generally at the end, at the bottom of trees, so that you're looking for pellets, you're looking for whitewashing. So owls also, um, just like all other birds, will whitewash, will let out excrement. Um, Look for feathers. There might be drop feathers. And generally, if it's a good habitat or food source in the area. You can also look for the bird counterparts. So during the day, look for the red-tailed hawks because once again, scientists have found that where you see red-tailed hawks during the day, a lot of times you'll see great horned owls in the evening. And then finally, we want to make sure, keep in mind those birding ethics. So if you decide to go out with a group of friends or if you um, join a birding group, um, a couple things to keep in mind. You can use callbacks or voice mimics, but there are a few different times you can't. If you're in a national park, you're not allowed to. If it's breeding season, so right now, you should not be doing that. Obviously, if the bird is threatened or endangered, or anywhere else it might be illegal. So please keep those things in mind. Once you do find an owl, be sure to move really slowly. You can drop down to the ground if you think it might be getting agitated, if it's straightening up and hooting at you. Um, if you also happen to find a nest, don't go telling everyone. You don't want too many people to be out there because we do not want to disturb these birds. If you do want to visit it, don't do so more than once every 3 to 4 weeks. And once again, make sure you stay away, you don't touch anything. And if you notice the bird getting agitated, just leave it be. And finally, um, be aware of what land you're on. You want to make sure you're not trespassing. I know at night it can get very exciting if you think you found an owl and you might not necessarily see signs. So once again, during the day, just scout it out. You can ask a landowner if you want, um, if you know what land that belongs to, but you just want to be aware of these things. And finally, just make sure you bring your sense of adventure. Have fun and enjoy being out in nature with all of your friends and, well, quietly doing all of this. And make sure you dress appropriately because it definitely can get chilly. All right. And finally, we want to talk a little bit about our conservation. I want you to take a minute and think, why would it matter to conserve our birds or our great horned owls? Why should we be aware um, of our great horned owls and want to keep them around. What do you think? Feel free to type it in. I'll give everyone a minute to type. Why is it important to conserve our owls? Yeah, just their beauty, right? I mean, once again, this is the owl that I took care of. Um, Gorgeous, gorgeous animal. Yeah, they keep rabbits and other small animals down, the vermin elimination, that pest control. They're a vital part of the food chain, food web. Exactly. Everything is connected. So even if something, our great horned owls, which we know they're not threatened, they're not endangered, they're doing great, they have a wide range. If you take them out, that's going to affect everything else. So we actually have a few different things that help keep them, along with other raptors and birds, safe. So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 is our oldest wildlife protection act. It basically protects birds from people because a number of birds were on the brink of extinction due to hunting for sport or for their feathers. So it says you can't hunt, pursue, wound, kill, collect, import, export any migratory bird, any nest, part of a bird, feather. This includes raptors. Um, the only way that you can have such items or birds is if you have a permit by the Secretary of the Interior. So, for instance, a lot of educational facilities like the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies and the place that I worked at in California have that. So, they're allowed to have mounts, feathers, skulls. You also have to do even more specific guidelines if you actually have non releasable raptors to teach with. Um, Also, in 1962, thankfully, they updated it so that indigenous tribes can collect feathers and other things for religious ceremonies. So, if you happen to go out owling and you find beautiful feathers on the ground, should you pick them up and bring them home? Judging by what we just learned? Yeah, no, just let them be. You can pick them up if you want, um, take pictures, but leave them there for others to see and just be part of nature. Another great thing, there's a lot of phenomenal organizations out there like the Raptor Research Foundation, that's nationally known, that do research, educational programming, citizen science, all to help conserve birds, um, and specifically raptors as well. Now, locally, we have Nature's Educators and the Birds of Prey Foundation, and they do a great job that use non releasable raptors and specifically owls too as ambassadors of their species to help educate the public about these amazing creatures. That is why I was able to work so closely because we would have schools to come to us and we would teach a raptors and conservation class with them. If you want to get involved, feel free to Google it. A lot of these places rely heavily on volunteers to help sustain their birds and their programs. So, and like we mentioned, our owls, our great horned owl, they're essential to our ecosystem. It's our responsibility here to help keep these beautiful birds around for a long time, and I think we're on the right track with it. So, with that being said, we have pretty much wrapped up with our great horn owls. We just want to say thank you so much for joining us. To make sure to keep in touch, our next webinar will be on Thursday, April 8th, and it's going to be all about spring migration by Meredith McBurney, who's been with the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies for a very long time and is one of our banders. Make sure to check out our Facebook page, our website. We have all of our events up there. Right now, if you're in the area, we are doing in-person bird walks that you have to sign up and register for. on Mondays and Saturdays here at Bar Lake State Park. And we're also super excited to be offering our in-person bird camps this year for campers ages 4 all the way through 17. We have day and overnight programs. So thank you so much. We do have some time for any questions that people might have come up with. So Tyler, any questions in the chat?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Stacey. I feel like I always learn something new about great horned owls whenever we have presentations like this. But we do have a couple of questions. You touched on this, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. How long do their young actually stay in the same territory as their parents?
So the young from the research that I did will stay up there for up to a few months. Essentially, what will happen is that as they become more mature and older and need more food, the territory that they grew up in will get too small and they'll essentially get kicked out and have to go find their own. So, generally, by late spring, early summer, they're going to be branching out and finding new areas to call their own.
Awesome. Here's another question. What are some like really good field marks for comparing great horned owls with long-eared owls? What are some ways that we can tell them apart?
Oh, that is a great question. So one of the big things, and I know with the great horned owl, I had mentioned earlier, they have a very wide range. Um, but looking for the long-eared owl, you want to see the habitat that they're in. So just like any bird, if you were to go out birding, make sure that the habitat um, is correct. Also, the long-eared owl is very slender, um, and they have more of an orangey face, and they have very long ears. If you were to compare, and I'm sorry I don't have a photo right now, of a great horned and a long-eared, you would see that those plumicorns are much longer, and long-eared owls are very rare and they're very seldom seen. So chances are you're going to come across a great horned owl before you find a long-eared owl, unless you're specifically going for it. Um, Long-eared owls are generally kind of darker and more coarsely marked below with like an orange patch near the wingtips, and they won't have that little white area like the great horned owl does.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great comparison. I also feel like long-eared owls are they're a lot smaller
Yeah.
than the big old great horns. Do great horned owls have any natural predators?
Great question. Occasionally there might be a golden eagle or a goshawk, but honestly, it's more of humans. If you were to say throw out an apple out of your car because you think, oh, it's biodegradable, if you think about it, that apple attracts what? Mice to the side of the road. And then at nighttime, when those little mice might be more active, that's when you might get your owl near. And that's how a lot of times our raptors and owls end up in a rehab program because they get hit. So generally, not lots of predators for them, but sometimes.
Great. We have a bunch of questions coming in, so this is
Okay.
great. I hope you're
I'll
ready.
do my best to answer all of them.
Yeah, there's only a couple more, but
Okay.
Janet is wondering. She has some great horned owls that live on her property, as well as some other raptors. Should she be reluctant to put out bird feeders?
So for the great horned owl, see, so it's always hard. You can't say, oh, they would never do that because there's always a chance they could. Generally speaking, the bird feeder isn't going to be used as much at nighttime, and they generally tend to actually hunt at night. Although during that dusk time, when some birds might come into the feeder, it might catch the eye. I would be more concerned about your diurnal raptors. If you have like a Cooper's, or red tail or other ones that might be more apt to actually go after your bird feeder during the day.
Yeah, I know if you have a feeders and a great horn or a Cooper's hawk or a sharp-shinned hawk is around, usually the birds will actually just avoid your feeder. So they're pretty good at avoiding their prey as best as possible. So I wouldn't deter against using a bird feeder if you have raptors. The birds can usually figure it out when's a safe time and when isn't. Here's another question. Do owls hunt in different areas depending on the season? It seems like my parents seen them more in California in the summer and the fall versus the winter and the spring.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they just kind of go where the food goes. The only thing I can think of where if you see them more in the summer and the fall is because they're not hanging out by their nest. If they're nesting during that, winter into spring kind of March time, they might be a bit more secluded and you might see them out more during the summer. Um, but I'm not exactly sure. I
Yeah, I agree
think they
with
go
you.
where the food goes.
Yeah, I feel like usually in like this winter and the spring, they're busy with nesting and raising their young, so you
Yeah.
might just not see them as much. All right, we got one more question for you.
All right.
Um, Any idea of what great horned owls do during or post a forest fire? It seems like they've had great horned owls on their land for years, and then most of the trees burned in the Cameron Peak fire this year.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, do you want to take a stab at that?
Honestly, I would have to do some research on it. And one of the things is that our great horned owls, they're not banded. There's no a lot of times you'll see owl cams with them, but there's no big project going on currently that I know of where scientists or ornithologists are looking specifically at great horned owls. But I know a lot of research and data has come out with what birds do in general pre and post fires. um, I would guess, if you think about it, that if their habitat was destroyed, that they're going to move somewhere else for a bit until it starts to regenerate and they have the rodents in the area and suitable trees and other birds start making the nests first, because once again they like to take over other birds nesting areas. But that's a great question. Yeah, we can reach out to some of our staff to see if they have it. If you just want to send us an email, we're more than happy to dig a little deeper. And you also can do the same because we might just find the same answers out there.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And maybe just observe as well. Maybe observe this year and next year, and see if you can collect your own data and see if there are maybe more or less. I would think that they'd probably a little less until kind of animals start coming back into the area and the trees start coming back would be my guess. But awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stacy. That was a wonderful webinar on gray horned owls. I want to go out and find some. I hope you all have a wonderful week and a great weekend. And if you're in Colorado, stay safe because we're about to get a lot of snow this weekend.
Yes, thank you again, everyone, so much. Happy birding. Stay safe out there, and we hope to see you at the next webinar or even in person if you're in the area. Take care.